And I want to start first by acknowledging and welcoming not only our panelists, whom I will introduce briefly here momentarily, but also all of you out there who have taken the time to join us tonight to learn more about MPAs, to see some of the beautiful photography that our amateur photographers who have participated in our Waves and Wildlife contest each year, and have another conversation. Not so much, I mean, we were just talking about the 30 by 30 efforts around the globe to protect 30% of the ocean by 2030. And of course, MPAs are a major part of that. And we will be talking at some length about MPAs tonight. So we will have with us tonight in conversation after we watch our beautiful slideshow, Nicole Palma, who is the program manager for the California MPA Collaborative Network. And then we have two of our photographers who won first and second prize last year. We have our first prize winner, Jon Anderson. I hope we're going to see his gorgeous picture in our collection this evening. I'm not sure what my colleague Gail McNulty pulled together the slideshow, so I'm not sure if it's in there, but I would certainly hope so. And Nathan Coy, who was the second place winner. So as we now move into the slide presentation, and so we do want to take a moment. It's an incredibly difficult time in our country particularly, but also around the globe. We're seeing many people in many countries standing in solidarity. But so much has been happening since the murder of George Floyd. And we just ask that you take a moment of silence to recognize that Black Lives Matter. And then we will start with our slideshow. Thank you. So we're back. I hope you enjoyed that. We did see Jon and Nathan's winning photographs launched the show right up front in the slide presentation, and then of course one of my favorite parts was the octopus video. I just can't watch that one enough. It's so fantastic. So again, thank you guys for joining us. And I just want to let you all know we are also live streaming on Facebook. So hopefully we are reaching many people out there in the world tonight and sharing the beauty of our California MPAs. So with that, I want to start with you, Nicole, and just ask you if you could give us sort of some history and background of why we actually have marine protected areas along the coast of California and how that all came about.
Sure. So hi, everyone. Nicole Palma, Program Manager with the MPA Collaborative Network. I can touch on that a little bit more here in a little bit, but to give you some background and history, marine protected areas is a general term that essentially refers to a defined named marine or estuary area that is protected in some ways. And so in California, we see this in a few different ways. We have our federal national marine sanctuaries and monuments, and then we also have our California state network of marine protected areas along the coast. And that all came about in 1999. California legislature passed the Marine Life Protection Act, often referred to as MLPA, which required the design of a network of California state MPAs based on local knowledge and best available science. So this current network, which ended up being about 124 MPAs, or marine protected areas, was planned regionally and regional stakeholder groups along the coast over a period of 13 years. And it included input from a variety of stakeholders: conservationists, fishermen and women, tribes, agency representatives, scientists, and many others. So in 2012, the planning process was finalized and the nation's first statewide science-based network of MPAs was established here in California. So we are coming up on 10 years in 2022, where there will be a management review of this network to basically see how we're doing and see how we could do better in the management realm of things. So you may be hearing a lot about this in the MPA realm. Right now, these MPAs protect 16% of state waters, and there are different types of MPAs in California, and they all have kind of different levels of protection. Some allow take of resources, and others do not. So the ones that do not are state marine reserves, or SMRs. We love our acronyms here in this realm. Gets a little confusing at times. But those fully protected areas, those SMRs, state marine reserves, cover about 9% of our California waters. I can keep going, or can save the rest for later.
Yeah, you maybe take a little bit of a breath there, but it's really important that people understand what our MPAs are. And you mentioned, I think, 124 up and down the coast of California. And how many do we have right here in the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary? I know we've got quite a few.
Yes. So I'm not exactly sure within the actual sanctuary, which is that federally recognized marine protected area, which has kind of different levels of protections compared to our state marine protected areas. But between Santa Cruz County and Monterey County, we have 19 marine protected areas. Monterey County actually has 17 of those, which is the highest number of any county in the state. Which, you know, if you're from this area, which I am based in Monterey, it kind of makes sense. We love our marine environment over here.
Excellent. So I just want to turn attention now to our two photographers, Jon and Nathan. And Jon, I see you have another gorgeous photograph sitting behind you, or you sitting in front of. Can you tell us what that is? It looks like
Yeah.
jellyfish to me, but I don't have the best.
Yeah. So my background behind me is a plain wall, so I decided to use the zoom thing to make it a little more interesting and use one of my photos. So this is a jellyfish. It's called a Scripsia pacifica, which is a pretty cool one that is not super common. It's probably more common to find them washed up on a beach than to see them diving. And I think I've seen them like maybe twice or three times total diving. This is actually the second time I saw them, and this was just north of Point Lobos, so inside of one of the marine reserves there, between there and Monastery Beach.
Yeah, that is really a great thing. The way the jellyfish pops out of the picture, at least non-photographer, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah, that's kind of a function of, you can see the sun kind of above my head. So
Yeah.
the sun is actually kind of working as a backlight there. And with translucent subjects like jellyfish, that works really well to help them give them that kind of glow. And then the flashes we use underwater also contribute to that.
So I just want to back up a minute, and talk about why we actually have these two wonderful photographers with us. And so Save Our Shores has been running an amateur waves and wildlife photography contest. One of the requirements is that the photographs are taken in one of our precious marine protected areas. And each year we have had the pleasure of collaborating with the Sanctuary Exploration Center here in Santa Cruz, which is down on the very end of Pacific Avenue, if you consider, I don't know, well, it's the end on the ocean side, so right across from the wharf and the Dream Inn. It's a great place. If you haven't ever visited it, you should go there. But in any case, we hang our exhibit and it stays up for a month at a time. We typically do it in the sort of July to September timeframe, depending on when we get the contest launched and when the Exploration Center is available. And we will be doing that again this year. It will be a little bit more challenging, as there are restrictions on accessing our beaches in some areas, and with shelter in place or not allowing group events, whether we're able to have a live exhibit or we have to figure out a virtual exhibit. We will figure it out, and we will be doing it again this year. And I hope Jon and Nathan, you will both engage and send us some more of your incredible work. So I want to go over to Nathan now and ask you, when did you get into photography, and when did you start doing, sort of ocean and in particular MPA photography?
So I think sort of a funny question. I mean, a lot of us have been not as a commentary on the question, but we love taking photos all the time, right? At this point, and so I think one of my all-time favorite photos I've ever taken actually is from when I graduated high school, and I was sort of like, I got black and white film with like a point and shoot, and I have this like photo that just like I love. Anyways, it turned out really good, and then I didn't do it again for a long time, or take any photos for a long time. And then probably about four or 5 years ago, I was finally in a position to start diving again. I got certified a long time. Well, I guess it would have been about 15 years ago now. But I wasn't really in a position to dive. It's sort of geographically and financially, it's a luxury in some senses. People make it at work, but it can be tough. So I started diving. I'm definitely not a natural diver. For me, it was actually the diving is not easy, but being in the water is really transformative. So I sort of kept at it. It actually took me probably 100 dives of really mellow dives to even begin to get comfortable. Where some people, they get in and after 5 dives, they're fish. But I'm really sort of, fascinated by what I see underwater. So I think it's probably relatively early on, probably in the first couple of years. Like a lot of people, I think GoPros are the gateway. So I think I had a GoPro for a little while and got, and they can do great things. But I really got a desire to have a strobe. So, I think controlling light underwater is one of the biggest challenges. And I really wanted to get a strobe, especially for small subjects. And so that really shifted things. And so at that point I sort of started. So I guess I've been somewhat seriously for about 3 years, a little over 3 years now, taking photos. But it's been a lot of them in the meantime. So I think I've been all over the world at this point. But I dive California a lot. I probably get in, well, last year I probably got in 140 dives or so in California, I think, all up and down the coast from San Clemente Island up to like Salt Point up in Mendocino County. So, and then off Big Sur for a while. So I've been trying to do Big Sur trips annually, but this year wasn't really in the cards for reasons we all know, unfortunately. But the beginning of this year was a great start to the year. So I was diving every weekend up until mid-March, and then haven't really been in too much since. But we actually had a really great, in February, we had a great Scripsia like sort of bloom where there's like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them in this like really small area. It was amazing. And so that was kind of an exciting moment because they are, you don't see them that often. And whenever I've seen them in the past, it's always been like just a couple of them and not hundreds. So, but I guess that's sort of a long answer to to the question, maybe.
Yeah, very interesting. Now, I appreciate your story. And Nathan mentioned the sort of Scripsia. Did I say that right? Bloom. Is that when you caught that photograph, Jon?
No, this one is. It's a few years old. I forget exactly when it was, but I don't remember seeing. I think there maybe were 2 the day we saw them. There's an area between Monastery and Point Lobos that divers call Mono Lobo because it's like right between there. And so I'm pretty sure it was actually the first day out with a friend who had gotten a new to him boat. And we had kind of an adventure. It was flat enough like to go down to Carmel. Pretty much you always launch in Monterey if you're going to go out on a boat. Unless it's like a kayak or something. So we launched in Monterey and it was flat enough that we went around to Carmel. And we're lucky enough to get a dive there, but the wind started picking up and we had a few motor troubles and stuff. So it was an adventure, but it was a great dive. And then we got back around the point safely. So always a little bit of an adventure when you go out there.
So what's your story, Jon, in terms of how did you get into photography and why are MPAs?
Yeah, it's kind of similar to Nathan's, but different in the sense that beyond the amount that like everyone is into photography where they use their phone and maybe get a point and shoot to take photos on vacations. Like I wasn't really into photography until I started diving in California. So I started diving actually when I was 12 years old. So I've been diving for a little while, but it was a family vacation thing. I grew up in Colorado, so landlocked. And we would go on family vacation occasionally and dive. And we had a point and shoot in a housing that we'd take tropical pictures, and it worked fine. And it was interesting, but I wasn't really into photography. And then I moved to California after college for work to the Bay Area. And at that point, I'd kind of heard you could dive in Monterey. And I didn't really know much about it or what it looked like. And I was like, oh, well, I mean, I'm certified to dive, so maybe I'll go try this sometime, kind of as like looking for something to do on weekends when I wasn't working. And even from that first time, like people who dive in our waters know the conditions can be challenging, and there's times when you can't see a foot in front of you. But the amount of life especially when you think of small things in our waters, just is mind blowing. Like if you've been in tropical places like Caribbean or that, there's a lot of life too. But for whatever reason, there's kind of this like, I feel like people associate cold, dark water with lack of life, which is as far from the truth as possible once you get in there and see it for yourself. So I think kind of from then I was really interested in sharing what I was seeing in these California waters, because I don't think I could ever get my family to brave the cold and go out there and dive there. And so I got them to actually mail me, at that point, probably 10-year-old point and shoot camera and housing they had, no flashes or anything. And I took it for a dive. I think, if I remember right, that was actually South Monastery on a flat day, the first time I took the camera. And there just is not enough light for an old point and shoot camera with a small sensor to take still photos in an automatic mode in Monterey. It's too well, maybe on a really good day it would work, but the shutter speed was automatically going so slow that everything was blurry. So I'm an engineer is what I do for work, and that kind of, I guess, probably triggered it for me. And then I was like, okay, I want to solve this problem. I want to be able to take these photos of these places. And at that time, I knew very little about photography from a technical side. And so I took the effort to learn and figure out what it was that I needed to be able to capture those places. And it's been a slippery slope since then. That was probably about 5 or 6 years ago. And I've gotten very into it. And actually I was away from California for a year, and I just moved back 2 months ago. And so I'm definitely, I did dive here a little bit last year when I was here for work, but not as much as I had previously. And I'm looking forward to really getting back into it when we can. So.
Cool. So question for both of you, but we'll start with Nathan. So how did you find out about our, and what sort of, kind of why did you decide you wanted to enter it? And were you surprised when one of your photographs won second place?
So I think I entered the year before also, I think, if I remember right. Possibly. Yeah, I did. I think I had an honorable mention the year before with the harbor seal photo, which actually showed up, I think, on the slideshow with this harbor seal from Point Lobos. I think there's, I really don't enter that many contests, but I sort of every year there's this thing called the Monterey Shootout, or at least almost every year, we'll see. Which is a great contest that's sort of local, put on by sort of a national or international level camera store that's based in Monterey. It's a great event they sponsor. And so I entered that. I think that was the first one I ever entered. And then I was like, I'll enter, I'll look around in the area. And I sort of had made a commitment at that point, especially, that I was going to sort of, I guess there's a question you ask, like, what do you want to do? At some point you might reach a point where you ask, well, what do I want to do with this, right? Like, you're taking photos, like, do I share them on Instagram? Like, how do I do this? And so I, and then, or whether you want to try to make money at it even, right? That's a question people might ask, which is optimistic. But I think at that point, knowing that I already had a job that was pretty busy and took a lot of years to get to, that I didn't really, and I trained in the arts. So I trained in music, actually, and I work as a sound archivist and librarian. And just having an idea about that, and like sort of landing in a place where I got a stable living, I didn't really want to, it's tough. You have to make a living doing anything in the more creative side of things, at least with stability. I sort of made a decision that I was going to sort of look for or see ways that potentially the photos I took could support conservation efforts. So this contest sort of ties to that. And I think there's also the National Marine Sanctuaries run one. So I sent into that one when I can too. And I think I sort of focus on those ones. There's a few other things I've entered, but that's sort of how I thought about it as far as placing things that support conservation efforts. It's sort of, it's nice. I mean, diving and the photography leads to other things, right? So I've had the opportunity to take I took a marine biology course at City College in San Francisco, and then I took conservation biology. And so then you start getting this intersection of all these different kinds of things happening, which ends up being really interesting and sort of how you want to channel efforts. So that's sort of how I think I sort of arrived at entering this specific event.
We're so glad you did. Thank you. We hope you'll participate again this year, Nathan. So Jon, what about you? How did you even find out about the contest and why did you enter it?
Yeah. So I think if I remember right, I saw what would have been the previous year's results posted somewhere. I can't remember where, but I do remember the harbor seal swimming through the kelp forest picture that won 2 years ago. And I guess I wasn't previously aware of it, but then I remember after seeing that kind of like taking note and saying, oh, I should watch for when this comes around again because I have a lot of great photos. But kind of the bigger purpose behind it, like my original motivation for taking these photos was to be able to share what's under the water in California. And I think my guess is like probably less than 5% of the people in California have a good sense of what it actually looks like beneath the water in California. And I think like organizations like Save Our Shores and other organizations already have the mechanisms to be able to connect to more people than an individual can. Like, yeah, I do Instagram and I post my photos there, and I do some other competitions, including the Monterey one, which is really fun, and I've submitted photos to other stuff. But really, I mean, people who are well connected and already have built these networks, giving them access to use the photos that we've taken just helps further spread and further support kind of that initial motivation of mine to share what's there. And so I haven't taken any formal like marine bio courses or anything, but I've certainly gotten a lot more interested in it. And I've actually, for a while, I was actually doing some work with a marine bio professor in La Paz, Mexico, where I would actually dive with them and take photos for them for their students' research projects. And they put them in their papers and all sorts of those things. So it's really, I feel like there's a lot of interesting opportunities other than kind of the traditional, I'm going to make money selling photos, which is, as Nathan kind of alluded to, is very hard to do, especially with underwater photos. But there's a lot of other things you can do with your photos that are equally as meaningful. Like in the case of the working with the university, they would kind of trade me the opportunity to go dive with them in interesting places but I would take photos of things they needed. So it was like kind of like free diving in exchange for photos.
Very cool. Well, thank you also for the contest, and we hope you come back again this year as well. I want to jump back to Nicole now. And so you work directly with the MPA Collaborative Network, the California MPA Collaborative Network. Can you tell us about that and you know, what you do with the collaborative and how many there are? I know we have one in Santa Cruz and Monterey, but they're all up and down the coast. So talk to us.
Yes. So the California MPA network is that the actual marine protected areas themselves, 124 of them along the coast. The organization I work for is the MPA Collaborative Network, which is a network of 14 coastal county-based volunteer stakeholder groups. So like you mentioned, there's one in Santa Cruz, there's one in Monterey, there's one in pretty much every coastal county. Some are doubled up or split. So if you live near the coast or still want to be involved, you can always join your local collaborative. And these groups are made up of diverse stakeholders, and they're all volunteers. They volunteer their time to attend meetings and contribute to projects. And the organization, the MPA Collaborative Network, is kind of an umbrella organization that supports and coordinates the efforts of all of these local groups. So we can support bottom-up resource management. So we provide that structure and forum for diverse stakeholders like the scientists, the nonprofits, the museums and aquaria, the academic institutions, ocean business, tribes, fishermen and women. Anyone who's interested in being involved is welcome, and we provide a space for them to engage locally with MPA management and do diverse projects, everything from creating local brochures about their marine protected areas and doing outreach to different groups and organizations, to creating online training modules and videos, working with mini underwater drones, remotely operated vehicles that can capture underwater video and imagery, and also contribute to community science projects like California's Snapshot Cal Coast, which is an annual biodiversity BioBlitz in California. So involved in many different things. Each collaborative kind of chooses what they want to work on. The Waves and Wildlife photo competition is, I believe, one of those projects that came out of the Santa Cruz Collaborative through Save Our Shores. And we love it at the Collaborative Network. We are actually kind of replicating the model in our other collaboratives because they also loved it up and down the coast. We've been creating similar panels using member photos for education and outreach purposes at our compliance workshops and enforcement trainings, and then those are available for the collaborative to use at their own outreach events. All of the members can have access to them. So this network, like I said, it's all volunteers. There's no cost or anything to get involved. You can learn more at mpacollaborative.org. I'll post a link in the chat, and you can find your local collaborative and see some of the projects they've worked on, and learn how you can get involved, which you can reach out to the leadership of each collaborative, and we call those co-chairs, or to myself, and we can help you get started.
Yeah, the collaboratives are a great organization. Save Our Shores has participated for quite a while, and you know, the Waves and Wildlife contest is especially the exhibit and the is one of the favorite events that we put on at Save Our Shores. I just thoroughly enjoy it every year, and you know, being able to see those gorgeous photographs and actually meet the photographers like Jon and Nathan. I'm trying to make you one person, Jon Nathan. But you know, the other piece of it is the educational panels that we put together to allow the people who come to the exhibits to learn something unique about each of the MPAs, especially the ones that are represented in the photography. So, and we have one of the remote vehicles. We named him or her, I'm not sure, or they, not sure of the gender, but we have named it Seymour, because that's exactly what it allows us to do, see more of our underwater world. I have to say, the pictures are not anything as gorgeous as what these two gentlemen are able to take. They're kind of murky, but you know, we've had a lot of fun with it, and we've done quite a bit of exploring. But back to our photographers. Nathan, what is your favorite subject? Do you have an underwater creature that you just look for, that you loved?
So I think, well, it's sort of, you know, I think there's like a process that's enjoyable. So I think a lot of people really get involved with the process of finding little things, right? So I think that's really exciting. And I know that's something I particularly enjoy, is like going and looking for little things, whether they're nudibranchs, and so small almost that you can't even see them. You're like looking for their habitat. So you're like, oh, I'm going to look for hydroids. If I find hydroids, I'm going to get my face right up on that hydroid and look really close and see if I can find any nudibranchs on it, because otherwise you're not going to see them, at least with my eyes. So that I always enjoy that. I have, you know, a popular subject that I also have a particular affection for, the yellowfin fringeheads. The fringeheads in general are a little bit popular, but the yellowfin particularly, they tend to have a little bit more exciting fringe on their head. And there's a site that Jon also knows, I know, and I think he even has a name for it. I think he's called like the French Hotel or something like that.
Yeah, that's correct. It's the French
Yeah.
Hotel, and I can tell, like, there's quite a few local photographers, and like I know the one fish, the one that is most photographed. I don't think he has a name, but or she, I don't know actually. But I can tell when someone posts it. I was like, oh, they found the French Head Hotel because I recognize that actual fish. And like, I'm sure Nathan's been back to the same fish, but it's pretty cool to be able to visit the same animal.
Yeah.
Like over years. I'm sure I haven't been there in a while, but I'm sure it's still there.
Yeah, for the most part, actually, yeah. So yeah, we've definitely been visiting that. So it's like a stop off on this place. That's a great spot for. It's sort of a fouling environment, so it's a great place for little things and piers, things like that. So
Could you repeat the name of that fish? We had a question in our chat. The fish that
the common yellowfin French head. But yeah, it's this rock that has several of them in it, and there's several rocks actually, and then there's other ones that are in those, and there's actually some one spot French heads in the area too. So you can you do get a sense of where they are. And I've been down there once, and I think I may have seen a mating, very possibly.
wow.
Where one backed into another one's hole, and for a while, and then came out, which was very exciting. This last year, actually doing the Monterey event, I was there with my primary dive buddy, and we went out there and we were like checking the different rocks, seeing what's happening, kind of visiting everybody. And the one spot had eggs. So she told me, I usually I like the yellowfins a little bit more, so I tend to be less excited about the one spot. But she's like, oh, you got to look at it, after the first dive, you got to go look at the one that has eggs. And so I went over and I set up for video, and I shot video. It's super small, but it had eggs. It was super exciting. And then, admittedly, I didn't actually see this at the time, but when I went back to look at the video, because it's all very small things, and I was zoomed in really, really close, I got video of French head eggs hatching, which is like super exciting. To see this little fish like wiggle out of it. It's first off, the French head is sort of agitating on the eggs to sort of hasten it, it seems like. And then you see the eggs the fish slowly release, and they're sort of would go tail up. Then they would sort of like slither up like this, tail up toward, out into the water column. And that was pretty special. So you don't get to see things like that very often. So, but it's an exciting thing about going to the same place over and over again. And I think it's an exciting thing about our environment is there's seasons, and it's so dynamic. Like when we have like this sort of Polyorchis, the Scriptia blooms, that's there for 2 weeks, and all of a sudden it's gone, and you don't see them for a long time. And then you see something like, there's like some mating that's happening during a certain period of time, or you see sea hares, like California sea hares, which are these really interesting and amazing sea hares that are huge and have giant mating piles also. I guess that's thematic for this little bit, but and they're really something to see. So, but other times it's like you don't really see them. So I think, I guess I love all of it. I don't know, but I do like the French heads. To bring it back to sort of fade out a little bit here.
So were you able to capture a video of that sort of mating and the egg release?
I didn't get the mating. So this is the mating was yellowfin French heads, and that was quite a while ago. But I did get the egg hatching for the one spot French head. So that was a pretty special video.
Must be entered in the contest.
Yeah, I can
videos.
Send it along then.
Last year we introduced the videos, and that's where the one that was included in the slideshow of the octopus, that won first place for videos. So pretty cool. So Jon, what is your favorite creature to capture on camera down there in the deep blue?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to pick favorites, but I guess there's kind of two categories. There's the big animals and the tiny stuff. And really, I mean, you kind of have to decide before you get in the water, for the most part, which one you're going to try to photograph. In a lot of cases, you need totally different equipment. But also it's a totally different mindset. Like the way you dive for big animal wide angle photographs is totally different than the way you dive for the macro small stuff. Like it's feasible to like move maybe 20 or 30 feet in the course of an hour when you're looking for small stuff.
Oh, wow.
Whereas the big stuff also requires a bit of luck. So like it's pretty easy in certain places to like have a good chance of seeing sea lions and stuff like that. But other things like molas and some of the rays we have around and stuff is really, it's all luck, and you have to have the right equipment and you have to be set up to take the photo when they swim by. And I mean, I guess one of my most memorable experiences, not saying this is my favorite animal, but we have been looking for alive molas for a long time. Unfortunately, the sea lions harass the molas, and almost every Monterey diver has seen a dead one with its fins chewed off on the bottom, because the sea lions bite the fins off and leave them there. And then I guess the one bright side is you usually see like crabs and sea stars and things eating them. So at least they get recycled and they're not just wasted on the bottom. But one day we went to North Monastery and saw like half a dozen molas, young ones, juveniles. But we kind of went from never having a good mola encounter to having a dive where the entire dive was just like molas, like mola after mola after mola after mola. And like, again, I mostly shoot photos, but pretty much all of our cameras can also shoot video. And so that day I shot a little bit of video, and I actually do have a clip of like 3 of them passing each other, swimming around, which is definitely stand out as one of my top dives in California ever, or if not top
Well,
dive ever.
we'll be expecting to see that video in the contest also, John. So keep an eye out for the announcement. Really interesting that you said it's easier to capture the little things. You know, I guess I never really thought about it, but you would think getting the big guys would be easier.
Yeah, I don't know if easier is the right word, but I guess like, so my personal kind of strategy when I'm gonna go dive in Monterey, and I don't have any idea what the conditions are like, so I don't know how the visibility is gonna be, I don't know what people have been seeing, is kind of to default to look for little stuff. And that's just because there is so much little stuff and there's so much life that I've never had a dive where you didn't find something interesting. And I would say 90% of my dives, I've found something I've never seen before. And that's over hundreds of dives.
Pretty cool. Excellent. Yeah. So I love the little things, you know, the nudibranchs and anemones, and they're so colorful. The starfish, you know, and how do you capture? I mean, that picture you took, John, you know, where a good portion of it is the starfish, but there is so much else going on in that photograph, and the colors are just unbelievable. How do you capture that underwater? Or maybe that was not totally tide pool.
So that picture is actually taken at Carmel Pinnacles, and this was taken last year when I was in California on a friend's boat. And actually, the reason I took this photo was because the nudibranch that's kind of front and center. And that particular nudibranch, I've only seen a handful of times, and it kind of tends to be more like on the Carmel side of things. And I've never been able to take a macro photograph of it because every time I'm diving where they live, I have a wide angle lens on. And this is a wide angle photograph, but I really wanted to photograph, and the nudibranch is I guess the photo's not up there right now.
Yeah, it's up now.
Okay. Yeah, so the nudibranch is the red and white thing just between the starfish and the urchin there. And so basically, I was initially a little bit frustrated because I was like, well, I really want to take a photo of this nudibranch, but I have my fisheye lens on and I can't really, like, I'm not really set up to do it. And then I was kind of looking around and I was like, well, this nudibranch's in a pretty cool place. So I'm going to try to get my fisheye lens as close as I can and get my strobe set up to capture the entire environment of where this nudibranch lives, with the giant sea star and the urchins and the strawberry anemones. And so I worked on it and basically you have to move your strobes around a lot to kind of accomplish two things. One, get the light on what you're trying to, but two, there's a fair amount of particulate in our waters, which is why there's so much life, because it's all nutrients and plankton and that sort of stuff. And if your strobes are in the wrong spot, you get a snowstorm, and that's like all your picture will be. And particularly here, was pretty surgy. So I remember kind of getting blown back and forth. Like you move kind of like 2 feet to the right, 2 feet to the left, 2 feet to the right, with the surge, and you're trying to line up and get this photo and move your strobes around. But a lot of times you find a scene like this on the dive and you just spend the time like really trying to get that photo because you found something that you're interested enough in to spend time to get a photo. And so that was the case here, where I probably have at least 20 or 30 similar frames where this one really stood out when I went to review them.
It's unbelievable. Just the color and the capture of so many different species. So Gail, if you can, let's bring up Nathan's. Can you bring up Nathan's photograph, and maybe you can walk us through how you captured that gorgeous photo.
Okay, so the photo.
Sorry, just a second to get the photo. I wasn't prepped for that, and I can't really just grab it in the video, but I will look while you talk, Nathan.
It's okay.
I could jump in if with some things, and then Nathan, you can talk while we're looking at your visual.
That sounds great. I was going to come back to you, Nicole. Yeah, share what you're thinking.
Just based off of what Jon and Nathan are saying about their pictures and seeing so much diversity when they go diving and seeing something new every time, that kind of highlights one of the important reasons we need marine protected areas to protect whole ecosystems, and that wildlife, the species, the plants, the animals that live there. So we're not just focusing on a single species for conservation, but the whole ecosystem, the whole habitat, to essentially preserve these awesome places and these animals and plants for the future, so we can continue to see them years to come. And California's network of MPAs was specifically designed to try and encompass the full range of habitats that are found in California, everything from kelp forests to rocky reefs to the intertidal, sandy beaches, and even submarine canyons. And they were also designed as a network. Instead of having just a few large ones really spaced out, there's a lot more smaller MPAs along the coast, which allows fish and other species to spill over. It's called the spillover effect between the protected areas and in between them and the non-protected areas. So it really has this whole connectivity between the coast and allows all the wildlife to have protected areas up and down the coast. And like Nathan was saying about watching fish larvae hatch, those larvae are going to follow the current and move from one protected area outside of the protected area. They may grow big and be available for catch later, and then everyone is enjoying the resources of these protected areas along the coast.
Great. So we got your photo up, Nate, and I want to come back to you with a follow-up question, Nicole, but talk to us about this incredible, the lighting on this one is amazing, to me anyway.
So this one, so I mostly shore dive. I don't really have, I've been to the Carmel Pinnacles, and Carmel Pinnacles, I have to say, are one of the best examples of a state marine reserve that I've dove almost. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful site. I'd love to get out there again, but one of these days. So this one is actually off at the location where everybody learns to dive in Monterey. So even when I grew up in Chico, I got certified through college up there, and it's where I got certified. So this is at San Carlos Beach in Monterey. So, you know, there's a spot out along the wall. So pretty much there's several different ways to dive that beach, but one of the main ones is to dive the sort of Coast Guard pier wall area. There's all these rocks, and you know, you sort of end up with this environment that has all sorts of nooks and crannies, and there's lots of growth happening and kelp's growing off of it. It's really quite nice. And there's out about certain ways around out along the pier. There's like sort of a sand bowl that has a certain amount of seaweed growth and lots of other little sort of. There's a lot of tube anemones there, and it tends to be the place that has nudibranchs most commonly along San Carlos Beach, at least along the wall. I mean, they're all over, but if I go there, I can go there to look specifically for nudibranchs. So there's a few other ones. There's the rainbow nudibranch, which is this huge one that feeds exclusively on tube anemone tentacles, which is really esoteric and amazing. And in the case of this one, this was out there. So I went. My friend and I were out in the sort of. I don't want to say kelp rack. It's not like a melange of like kelp detritus and stuff, but there's all different kinds of kelp and different kinds of things on the seafloor. And so this was on a piece of kelp that was down there, and it was sort of in the right spot. And there's this thing where sometimes there's this thing that happens, and I've had this happen. This sort of, it's a frame of mind you can be in sometimes taking photos, and it's not so much sometimes. I really want to see a certain creature, but other times I want to find a creature that wants to be photographed, and I don't care how common it is. And so we actually see this a lot in Monterey. They're actually quite common, which almost undermines how pretty they are, honestly, because you get so used to seeing them. But this one was in the perfect spot for a photo, and so it worked out really well. So sometimes it's really nice just sort of taking photos of the things that want to be photographed. If there's something and you try to take a photo of it and it's hiding, and a lot of times it's not gonna be a good photo anyways. And I don't know if it's, I'm not anthropomorphizing the fish, but I don't think it's enjoyable probably or maybe I am a little bit. I don't think it's enjoyable probably for anybody, trying to get something to do something it doesn't want to do. So this one was sort of hanging out in a good spot and didn't seem to be running away, if you will.
When we look at all the photographs that come in each year, and we set up our panel, and I always am drawn to the nudibranch pictures. I don't know what it is about those creatures, but they just really speak to me. So we're going to have to wrap up, unfortunately. This has really been fun, and the passion you guys bring to telling the story of your photography just makes it all come so much more to life. But before we close, Nicole, I want to check in on the health of our kelp forests. And can you tell us what's going on? And I know we all know that we have the purple guys have gotten completely out of control. And how are things doing? And is there any difference between how the kelp's doing in MPAs or not? And I'm just curious about that. Yeah.
Sure, I can speak broadly. I am not personally involved in researching the kelp, but a lot of our members are directly involved with restoration efforts or research efforts. So it is a huge problem, especially up in the North Coast around Mendocino area, where the kelp forests are really being kind of decimated by these purple urchins due to a number of factors. But we have some members like Reef Check California is working with commercial urchin divers up there, and OPC, they just funded their project to kind of do test studies on the removal of the urchins in certain spaces inside and outside of marine protected areas, I believe, to see kind of the effects of that, and if that is something that will help bring kelp forests back. Look closer to home, we've been talking a lot about Monterey Beach and Point Lobos. I know Point Lobos is an awesome marine protected area, the State Marine Reserve. It's one of the 5th oldest of the MPAs in the network. It was actually established in 1974 prior to the Marine Life Protection Act. There's wonderful kelp forests there. It's why it's such a popular spot for diving and underwater photography. But we, almost a year ago now, we were with some partners out at Monastery using those underwater ROVs, and they were actually looking at the kelp forest, and you could see the line where the kelp forest ends and the urchin barren began. So it's not necessarily a North Coast problem, it's central and southern as well. So it's something that people are working on, and there is we are in the phase of long-term MPA monitoring right now, and one of the projects is focused on kelp forest, including using like aerial survey methods to quantify how much kelp forest is out there. And I can post a link to that recent update on that project in the chat as well.
Okay, great. Well, thanks so much for that update on our precious kelp forests, and we're all hoping that they come back as thick and vibrant and wonderful as they are. They're such important habitats for many creatures. I do want to thank each of you. Thank you for, sort of the scientific information that you brought to this, Nicole. Thank you, Jon, for your artistry, and Nathan also, and again for your passion around the sea life that you so beautifully capture. Before we close out entirely, I just want to remind people that this was a World Oceans Day, which we turned into World Oceans Week event, and we have more to come. Tomorrow evening, we have Ocean Trivia Night. So all of you out there, if you're interested, if you like to play those kinds of games, if you like Jeopardy or other things like that, please tune in. And Friday night, we're going to wrap up, well, Friday late afternoon and into evening, wrap up with the filming of a new documentary called 2040, which imagines the kind of world we could live in if we begin to really seriously tackle some of our most critical issues, especially things related to climate change and the impacts of climate change. It's pretty inspiring documentary. It's family friendly, so everybody who would like to make a little movie night with some popcorn on Friday, and then we're going to have a conversation much like this about the documentary after people have a chance to watch it. So we are going to close out for tonight with a trailer from the 2040 video. And again, I want to just thank you all, and I really hope to see some of your incredible work in our contest again this year. Have a wonderful evening, everyone.